because she's so cute.
Hey.
Welcome back, guys, to Fairly Odd Co-Parents. I'm Nessa.
I'm Ronnie.
How's it going?
Hey.
How's it going? Hey. I thought you were going to do like a slow fade out, but I guess not.
Hey.
It's cool. It's cool. It's cool. So, welcome back. This is episode 7 of our podcast. We are going to be moving into module 3, which is going to be on communication. But first,
yes,
we get to struggle through a dad joke.
Communication Nation. And like all dad jokes, this is going to be terrible. But here we go.
Here we go.
Why did the letter A go to the beehive?
To get the honey.
To go see... Nope. Okay. To go see his honeybee. Oh.
You're silly. Yep. Yeah. You have such good dad jokes. They're so corny.
So bad. They are so bad. They're really, really bad.
Yeah. You remind me of what's his face? Our friend Mike. Yeah. Anyway. All right. Moving on. So good one. Good one.
Moving on.
Moving on.
Now that we're done with that.
The struggle.
They're bad. I don't know. I'm almost like disappointed with myself. Like, that's what you got? Yeah, that's what I got. I guess that's what makes it a dad joke.
Next time to like liven up, I'm going to be like... They're going to the audience will laugh for me.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
Oh, I have a pain in my side from the laughing.
You don't have to. Knee. You don't have to do a pity laugh. I got
it. All right, guys. So let's get into our co-parent story of the week. Our co-parent story of the week this week, Junior and I chose based on our own interactions that we have had over the past week and dealing very much with communication. So over the summer, Junior usually gets the boys. They get to go be with him usually for about 6 weeks. And when they do, they're always so excited. They are looking forward to going to the youth center that's over there at the base that you're stationed. And, they get to experience like some more independence. They get time away from mom. Like they get to have alone time with dad. And, Junior doesn't get to do like every other weekend visitation. So like unlimited time with dad for 6 weeks is like, mind blowing for them. So
it's as Monty would say, has said in the past, that's when his summer starts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and like summer swimming days, that is huge for us in the summer. So they look forward to the summer swimming days. Both of our sons learn how to swim at this pool.
Yeah.
So the summers are really huge for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and they're huge for me because I get to have time off.
Makes sense.
Not to be ugly, but like I do get to have like some time to myself, and I get to I get to catch up on a lot of things for myself, like house projects and things that I've been wanting to work on that I put off. I actually put them off for the time that the boys are gone and for my bonus children when they're gone as well, because it's just Eduardo and I, like, he's easy, so we're both very flexible.
There's more freedom in it.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
anywho, unfortunately, this summer, Junior's not going to be able to have the boys for 6 weeks. There's a lot going on with his job that he is assigned to at the moment. There's going to be a lot of TDYs going on this summer. And so
Hmm.
I went into, proactive mode. And my sister, my older sister, had recently moved, and she is in Colorado and has been asking for the boys to, come out and visit her. So I reached out to her and was like, "Hey, guess what? Like the boys are gonna be free this summer. You wanna have them over? Like
Yeah.
not to be ugly, but I know the boys look forward to time away from me. So I was kind of just trying to figure out a way to like give them that opportunity still, without having to put them in like a camp, because that's something I can
Right.
easily do, but they still get to like come home to me every night. And
Yeah.
so that all worked out. And then there was just one week where I'm going to be in Chicago to go to one of my friends' weddings that Eduardo and I have already like confirmed for about 6 weeks, that I completely just like fell out of my
Get
head for a
spaced on.
second. Yeah. And I reached out to you and was like, can you keep them for that week? Like, I'm going to be gone for just 5 days. Can you hold on to them? And initially thought you'd be able to, but again, like turned out that you're not going to be able to commit to that, again, because of work. And so you and I tried to figure out a way to find support and to make sure that the boys are taken care of, because Eduardo and I, our flights are booked and like all of the arrangements are like it's a done deal. So, and taking the boys with us to the wedding is actually not an option because they specifically told us this is a kid free wedding. So yeah, so
Definitely
you and
want to
I,
honor that. You don't want to show up with your kids at a
yeah,
kid-free wedding and be like, "Hey,
they're
turns out
here.
we're bringing kids.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So where's the orange juice?"
Right. So we went back and forth. Junior came up with this idea, pitched it to me, and we talked about like the pros and cons of it. And like for me, it was something I was just not comfortable with. There was just a lot of things that were just a little uneasy for me. And so I was just like, this sounds like a good idea, and I don't think this is the time for it. There were some feelings for sure on both ends. Junior felt a certain kind of way. I felt a certain kind of way. And then, a couple days later, we kind of sat on it for a little bit. And then
Yeah, I'll
Junior was
say
like,
I just want to kind of put a little input. I would say we left the call, and I felt for the next couple days after that we weren't in a good place
mm,
uh, between the two of us.
mm-hmm,
That's how I felt, that I wasn't in a good place, and I felt like you weren't in a good place, and we weren't in a good place based off of how that conversation went.
mm-hmm.
Um, and from there, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, from there is when you reached out and was like, "Hey, can we have a conversation? Like, can we talk before the week continues?" And so we did. We FaceTime and we got to have a conversation, and you got to share how you were feeling or how you were choosing to feel, and I got to share how I was choosing to feel, and we just got to have a conversation, where we were able to engage in like fair fighting, and there was no name calling and yelling or anything like that. And we eventually were able to like feel better at the end of the conversation and clear off all of the negative emotions that you and I were feeling, and we were okay. So we came to an
Yeah,
agreement, and summer is around the corner.
yeah, it is. Also,
Yeah.
Disney World is around the corner, which is amazing.
Exciting, yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so that realistically, that kind of co-parent story of the week falls in line with what Module 3 is, and it's communication. And this will be great because we'll get to kind of go into it a little bit throughout this module, kind of what we did during our talk, because we did have an initial talk and we weren't good after that initial talk.
Yeah.
And it took another talk and utilizing some of these things and what we're going to talk about to actually get through it, to move past it, to kind of re kind of fall back into the values that we set for our family, and like to move forward, move past it, come to an understanding, and be good. And I would say after that point, like, oh man, I feel so much better. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like we're in a good place, and like there's not that like,
We're back
I
on the
don't
same
know.
page again, I feel like.
Yeah, we're
Mm-hmm.
back on like same page, same team. We're like trucking forward, which feels
Right.
great. And it just took good communication to make it happen, which
Yeah.
that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
So,
So,
is there
yeah.
anything you wanted to speak on with the purpose of today's episode?
No, I mean, yeah, go ahead, take it from here.
All right, take it from here, Captain. I got this. Let me fly this plane. Let's look out for towers. Let's not fly into this
Is this what your pilots say when you're
lightning storm over here.
load mastering?
No, we just fly through that. We
Watch
just
your
fly.
language.
I actually, you know what's
Good
crazy is
catch.
like,
Good catch.
you know what's crazy is during one of my deployments, we actually got hit by lightning.
I remember
Um,
you told me about that. You told me.
yep, we got hit by lightning and it was wild.
I remember you were
It
like, I was like, did you spin? What happened? Tell me all about it. Did your hair stand up? Like,
nothing really happened. We just got like a black spot on the plane, and
yeah, that's
then
what
we were
you
good.
told me. I
I
was
was like,
like,
oh,
huh.
wasn't that crazy? Other than
That's not as fun as I was expecting.
there was like a loud pop and then like a flash of light. Um, and we're like, oh
But
shit,
like,
I
did
think we
your
just
hair stand up? Did you have like static electricity all over you?
yeah, I actually got superpowers from it, and most people don't know this, but I can shoot lightning out of my toes.
Okay.
Is
I'm gonna
that
say something.
is, is
I was
that what
gonna
you're
say
looking for?
no. I was gonna say something smart, but I'm trying to be better. Trying
Okay.
to work. I'm working on my communication.
Uh, well,
Just kidding. Mm,
this is the perfect place to be. Okay, so
right.
all right, let's get back on track. Communication styles. That's what we're going to speak on first. Is there are different ways that kind of people in general communicate. You kind of fall depending on the person, depending on yourself, you kind of fall in between typically through these four communication styles. And what we had listed is passive communication, aggressive, passive aggressive, and assertive.
Right. And
And
these different communication styles are actually, research based, and it came out of a Southern New Hampshire university. And so these communication styles are not like the only communication styles out there, right? But um, you can't talk about every type there is in the world, and so essentially they came down to like just these four. So.
hmm, well, why don't you tell us about them?
So, um, these four communication styles, like Junior was saying, there is passive. And so, what passive often looks like is, somebody who doesn't speak because of fear. They're afraid of conflict, they're afraid of rocking the boat, right? And often leads to misunderstanding because they don't speak up, they don't voice their opinion or their feelings or what's going on with
Hmm.
them, and so they sometimes have these nonverbals, and but they're not speaking on what's going on, and so those nonverbals get misinterpreted, and then there's this form of resentment that kind of could occur from
It
the
can
other
create some
end.
confusion.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And
Can
so
definitely create some confusion.
these passive communication nerves, if you will, they really love interpersonal relationships. And so they'd rather hold on to that relationship than engage in a fight. And so if they are able to connect with a person, then they will swallow their pride, they will swallow whatever it is that's going on for them, their feelings, so that they can keep that relationship with the other person and just like
Right.
deal with their feelings internally.
Right.
The next type of communication style is aggressive. This is usually driven with anger, judgment, pride, even. There's lots of hostility that's involved. They're usually like non negotiable, like very rigid, not really like flow with type of energy. And so you kind of see
It's like the
this.
opposite of passive, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Somebody who's like, you will hear what I have to say.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And so, and at the end of the day, one of the things I will say, I should probably say this at the end, but your communication style shifts. Like you,
sure.
yeah, there are times where you choose to be passive. There are times where you choose
Yeah.
to be aggressive, and
Right.
so not like Junior, but like listeners. Um, and so when you see these like assertive and aggressive styles, like you usually think of CEOs and like bosses who are just like that, like let's get this done, and like there's no feedback, there's no listening. You just like, this is what's happening. Passive aggressive is the third type of communication style. And so the passive aggressive isn't direct. They're kind of like, they are speaking up, but they're a little passive about it. And they're like, well, what do you think about this? Like, I had this idea. And then, of course, like the other side receives it as like, oh, they're suggesting an idea. I have the ability to say yes or no, and I'm going to say
Mm-hmm.
yes. And then there creates some more resentment, right? Like, oh, they didn't listen to my idea. And so
Mm-hmm.
then there's some resentment, there's some confusion, because there's also like, oh, I gave you my idea and you didn't even listen. And like, why didn't you listen? Like, don't my words matter? That kind of thing can come up. And the passive aggressiveness tends to happen because sometimes the person gets so caught up in their head that they are over analyzing and over assessing a situation. Um, and it kind of gets to a point where it's like they're like a dead fish in the water, where they're just like not moving. Like, they suggest something, but then like nothing happens. And so, and then the last communication style that occurs is assertive. And assertive is actually thought to be the most productive form of communication. The person who speaks is confident and respectful to others. They create a space for open and honest type of communication. This is the type of leader that or boss that you enjoy going to work for. Like, they give you direction, but they listen to feedback. They listen to criticism. They listen to constructive criticism, and they hold each person in the room with respect, right? They have dynamics of controlling the situation, but they're controlling the situation because they're trying to have the betterment of the mission at hand, and so they're simply wanting to continue to progress forward. And again, like, there are moments where you can step into any of those Ford styles. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's just that sometimes we kind of lean more into one than the other, or we are usually more passive than aggressive, and or usually more assertive than passive aggressive, or something like that. So um
Yeah, I would
that
say like I was, for me, I probably fell into passive in when I like much younger. I definitely fell into passive. I just like whatever I fear whatever it is that I'm going to say, how it's going to affect people around me, or I even fear, bringing this up, and I'll just swallow it. I just move forward with what is. Um, and that has its own, it creates its own, I mean, there's prices and benefits to both of it, right? There's
right.
good things and some, I don't know. You get some good things and some bad things from it. It just depends what it is that's serving you at the moment.
Yeah. No, I agree. I feel like I agree with your assessment of yourself. I know that during our marriage, there was a lot of times where you were very passive. with the
Hmm.
things that I would say. And I always, I don't know if you do know this or not, but I always wanted your input. I was like, well, what do you
Right.
think? And you'd be like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm just gonna, lead the train or whatever. Um, and there are definitely times where it was just like I knew what I was doing. Not that I'm like the smartest person in the room, but I knew what I was doing. I knew that it was going to benefit us. I knew that this was going to help us to wherever it was that we were going. And you were just like, yeah,
Hmm.
like go for it. And passive is, the perfect way to continue moving forward when there's somebody who's assertive and like, they're
Yeah.
confident and everything like that. So and I agree that there are times where a person can be more passive aggressive or even aggressive if there's somebody
Sure.
who is steamrolling
Right.
or just not making a decision. You got leaders, or not necessarily always leaders, but you got a person who is not making a decision, and like they're kind of just there. You need somebody to come in and like grab the reins and like, okay, we get to keep going, like we got to move
Yeah.
forward.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Um, cool. So that's different communication styles, and this is good for you to kind of maybe understand where you fall.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Listeners, like, do you fall under passive? Do you fall under aggressive? Like, can you take notice or put yourself in one of these places that you fall into more than the others? I know for me, aggressive communication style is, I rarely fall into that category.
Mm,
Um, and it's good to take notice of where you are in this, so that way you can work on maybe a place you want to be, a communication style you want to be in. Okay, so, with that being said, let's go into unhealthy communication habits.
mm.
Um, and unhealthy we all got them.
Yeah.
Like, we all got them, and they're
Mm-hmm.
pretty easy to go into. Um, it is,
I know mine. I'm working on
yeah,
mine.
right.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the point of, we're gonna talk about these unhealthy communication habits, and it's to recognize maybe where you fall into them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you're able to recognize that, then you're able to do something about it. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mindfulness is such a powerful skill to
yes,
have.
yes, to know where you are, where you stand, where you know yourself
Mm-hmm.
uh, in specific situations or stressful environments, and knowing how you react
Mm-hmm.
is amazing, to be able to be aware and be able to correct. And like, gosh, but mindfulness is it's a practice. Like, you have got to practice it in order to be better at it. Um, so, anyways, moving on. So, there are many things that lead to unhealthy communication habits. So, some examples are fear. Fear can
Mm-hmm.
lead to unhealthy communication habits. Uncertainty of what you're actually feeling can lead to unhealthy communication habits. Lack of experience expressing what you're feeling. Um, Timidness, can lead to it. Lack of experience in good communication. If you don't even know what good communication looks like, you probably have some bad communication habits. Um, and feeling the need to protect self, or having anxiety, can lead to uh, unhealthy communication habits.
Mm.
And some examples of these are, you brought up the Four Horsemen. So the Four Horsemen was included in, what was the book that you said?
Yeah, so there is a book out there, and it's called The Seven Principles of Marriage. It's a really great book we actually read this when we were married, and it keeps coming up in different parts of my life because it's seven principles for making a marriage work, and it's by John M. Gottman and Nan Silver, and but you can use the skills that they talk about in this book in so many parts of your life, right? Because a
Sure.
marriage and a divorce,
Hmm.
and a co-parenting relationship is a relationship, right? You have
Right.
relationships at work, you have relationships with your children, with your spouse, with your friends. And so in the book, they talk about these are four horsemen of relationships, and the four horsemen that lead to toxicity in a relationship. And so that's where essentially it comes from, and it just gets reverted back to, or people cite that this book quite often.
Yeah, it expands to everywhere in relationships. So
Mm-hmm.
the four horsemen that we're talking about are criticizing, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. So these are the things that are going to inhibit good communication. So it's criticizing, right? Like, let's think about it. If you go into like everybody, everybody knows that like, hey, we need to talk, and like,
What do you want to talk about?
and if it if you go into like a talk or a conversation with someone, like we need to talk, and you immediately start coming off like you are doing this, you're doing this, you're making me feel this way, like you're doing that, you are like, why can't you do this? If that is your if that is how you go into a talk or a conversation with someone, you are immediately that is an immediately a quick way for that other person to feel attacked.
Also,
Um,
I will say that if somebody were to approach you with some constructive criticism or just feedback,
sure.
and like, hey, I really like you're doing whatever, well, you do it. Well, that's what is going, like you point the finger back.
Right.
Like you're not listening to what's going on. At the end of the day, it's constructive criticism. You can
So,
decide
okay.
what you want to do with that. So
I think criticism and constructive criticism are two different things.
right. No, what I'm saying is when somebody comes with you with constructive criticism and you
Yes.
respond with, well, you do this, and like
So that's where
that's
we're going to get into the next
right.
horseman. So, horseman number two, defensiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's exactly what you're speaking on.
Mm-hmm.
When there is constructive criticism, right? And it's something that, maybe you're in, I don't know, you're getting feedback from workers or a boss, or um, you think you're open to constructive criticism. And when somebody starts saying, like, hey, yeah, I noticed, like, in this situation, you kind of tend to react in this way, and you immediately like, oh, well, that's how you react, or like immediately just start deflecting, or immediately start trying to just protect yourself and not really being open to it.
Mm-hmm.
You just start going into that defensive pattern,
Mm-hmm.
um, no matter if it's true or not, right? If it's the situation calls that you actually are doing this and your response is just to be defensive,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that doesn't lead to good communication either. Um, that kind of will just halt, and then it can start an argument, and
Right.
that other person could be like, well, no, yes you do, and then, or they're going to be like, well, wait, why is this being turned back on me, like we were and then they start maybe getting defensive themselves. Like, it just creates a
A vicious
kind of
cycle.
a vicious cycle, a toxic
Yeah.
pattern, and it's so defensiveness can be one of those things that halts good communication. The next one is if things, start going to be bad, or somebody is in open communication. Next one is stonewalling. And stonewalling is the stopping of all communication. It is the shutting down of oneself, shutting down and closing off to what someone else is saying. Um, and there's that is something that does not lead to effective communication. If only one person is talking and the other person's like checked out, like, nope, not listening to it, or nope, I'm not even gonna acknowledge you. That is a quick way to get things ramped up, or to get that other person just to be like, yeah, I'm like done with this talk, or I'm done with feeling this way. Um, Stonewalling is that's not communication at all. And at the
Right.
same time, it is communication.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, you
is
get nonverbals. Yeah.
yeah. So the next one is contempt, and so that's like, like if you're downplaying what somebody is saying, um, or you're dismissing it, or you're mocking them, or you're laughing, or they're sharing something at you with you about like, hey, this like happened and it really hurt, and you're just like, yeah, yeah, that was kind of funny, but yeah, I can understand why it hurt you. Like, God, that is so rude and like,
Is that a trigger for you?
no, I'm just saying
Okay.
that's like, I can feel how that would feel for someone. I can have
Yeah.
empathy for that. Um,
A lot of
and
people,
if you're
a lot of
if you're
people misinterpret
condescending,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and if you're
Hmm.
condescending, and like all of those behaviors do not promote healthy communication. None of
Hmm.
these behaviors make the other one person want to keep talking to you or keep opening up to you. Um, which, again, if the point is to stop communication with someone or to have unhealthy communication, these are the things that you want to do. The last thing that I want to talk about kind of falls under all of these. And that's like screaming, yelling, and like really aggressive habits. And you can do these in defensiveness, you can do these in contempt, you can do these in any of those. Um, and I want to say there's a difference between raising your voice from being passionate about the way you're feeling or passionate about um, your stance on something, right? If you're like really passionate about your stance on something, like, man, like I just feel like this is really hurting me so much, and like it is causing me like to have stress in the mornings, and like that's how I'm starting my days, and you're like really passionate about your emotion. There's a difference in that than just yelling at somebody, almost like forcefully making them have to understand or
Hear
have to listen
me.
to it. Yes, like
Yeah.
perfect. Um, there's a difference in yelling
Hmm.
as opposed to raising your voice because you're passionate.
Yep.
Um, and also, if someone responds to your yelling by doing what you want them to because you're yelling at them, you're creating much bigger issues in that relationship. Uh,
Yeah, because they're probably doing it in contempt, you know, or
they're
in
either going to
resentment.
be resentment. They're either going
Hmm.
to just be like, you know what? I'm not going to really pay attention to your, I'm not going to really pay attention to how I feel anymore. I'm just going to do what you're saying because you're screaming at me.
Right.
Or they're just going to have contempt from that point on. They may do
Hmm.
what you say, but they may underneath just like despise you.
Right.
Um, know which way you look at it. Like, is there any goodness that comes from it? Um, so those are kind of the four things, and along with the screaming, that do not help with uh, healthy communication.
Right.
And we all fall into these at some point. Like we said
Yeah.
earlier, it is about being able to recognize it, and the goal is to correct it on the spot and choose into the things that we're going to go into next.
Right. And if you actually go into the book, they talk about alternative methods that you can check into as well. Um, Rather than using criticism, rather than using contempt. But for us, we kind of expanded on that and found not just like four simple things, but like we came up with a whole toolbox of what you can pull from to support you in communicating, but also to listening in the best way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the first things that we want to talk about was whenever you listen or you are communicating, and coming from I is a tool that is used most often in therapy. Um, Therapists usually support you in effective communication and making sure that you come from start with I feel, what have you. And when you're also coming from I, though, you're also taking ownership for how you're feeling and clearing off whatever is going on with you, but it also takes away from shifting blame onto the other person, right? And going into pointing the fingers, going into criticism. Like, this is where you get to step into ownership of how you're feeling and how you are showing up in that moment. um Also, when you're saying I, you're not saying you. And so that kind of also diminishes a sense of defensiveness that could
Hmm.
come up for the other person. If I'm going to constantly talk about what you're doing and how you're making me feel and you're doing this to me, there's going to create some sort of tension and defensiveness on the
Yeah,
other end. Yeah.
human nature is to get defensive and protect themselves, right? Even if you are mindful, or you haven't practiced mindfulness very much, human nature is to protect and be defensive. Um, so coming from I kind of lowers those walls a little bit. Um,
Right. And it creates a vulnerability, which is what both ends are ending up wanting to cover up. You're not wanting to be vulnerable and show the hurt that is underlying there. So you're
mhm.
going to cover that up with anger. Anger is a secondary feeling. And so coming from I and leaving out the you is what will support you.
Yeah, and so this was something that when we had our second talk, I know for me, I asked for this, for us to have this conversation. And I really led off with just, I am feeling hurt. I am feeling disconnected. Like, I'm feeling tension. And I was just speaking to all the ways that I was feeling because, for one, I felt I needed to get it out. I needed to clear myself and to acknowledge that this is what I'm feeling. And I also wanted you to know that this is how I'm feeling and with how things are going. And it does take vulnerability to do that. And somebody is a lot more willing to be receptive to someone who's being vulnerable or opening their heart than someone who's pointing the finger and saying, you, or look what you're doing. Um, and it's a lot more respectable when somebody is saying, I'm taking ownership of how I'm feeling right now, uh, than, blaming it on other people or blaming it on the person you're talking to.
Right, because there was no point in time when we were having a conversation where you told me I was making you feel a certain type of way. It was like, this is what is coming up for me. This is how I'm feeling. And it
Hmm.
gave me an opportunity to be in the know of what's going on for you
Hmm.
and also reflect myself, like, um, if I contributed to that or if that's something that you created on your own.
Yes. And
Hmm.
so, and when you come from I, the whole purpose of really having these talks and coming from I is releasing everything that's going on inside of you. And when, that other person starts asking for details or starts asking for examples or instances, that's really when you can say, like, oh, well, when this happened, uh, I felt this way. Um, and usually that's for clarity, that's for understanding of what are the details, and sometimes the other person may not want to know the details or may not even ask for details. They may even respond in a negative manner or unhealthy. They may be defensive. And the whole purpose of coming from I isn't to get, a specific reaction from them. It is to clear off everything that you're feeling, um,
Right.
and to acknowledge and take responsibility for what you're feeling. And yeah, so after that, the next thing that really helps our conversations and helps people in general in healthy communication is listening with purpose and intent.
Right. So when you listen to with purpose and intent, you're listening to understand and to hear what's going on from the other end. So you are practicing and sitting with them and rather than listening and preparing for a counter argument or a counter statement, you're listening simply to hear what they have to say. And that
Mm-hmm.
is putting your pride to the side, putting that anger that you have going on, or whatever those negative emotions that are stirring, you get to let those simmer and die down and just listen with purpose. You know,
Yeah.
truly hear where that person is coming from and what seems to be going on for them. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you're not coming up with a counterattack and or a strategic response, you are simply just listening and not having to figure out a way that is going to make them wrong for what they said. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily saying that you're right. You're just getting to listen. And so
Right.
that's just I think that a lot of people just want to be heard. They just like I just hear my side, just hear how I'm
Yes.
feeling. That in itself can be so validating for somebody.
Right. And also too, you can I can understand where you're coming from and understand like your position and still have my own position, right? It's the fact that acknowledging, saying, okay, I can see where you're coming from. I can understand why you're feeling the way you do, or understand why you may have reacted the way you did, and know that, okay, like this makes sense now. And maybe I disagree with your stance, but I hear what you're saying and I can understand where you're coming from. Um, and that has more um, there is more progress and forward movement in that than there is to just say, no, you're wrong. Like, I completely disagree with you. Like, typically you can understand where somebody is coming from when you hear and really listen to where they really are coming from,
Right.
and what they are feeling, and acknowledge that they are having an experience
Mm-hmm.
um, that is specifically to them.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right. I
so,
feel like when we had our conversation, there was we gave each other the floor of being able to share how we were feeling without
mhm,
interrupting and without having to um, come up with a counter argument or a counter attack. But it also gave each of us the opportunity to address what was happening. You know, you got to say how you were feeling, and
yes,
I got to sit there and respond with what was coming up and let you know that that wasn't my intention and that wasn't the purpose of what was going on or anything like
right.
that. And so I think the listening with intent and purpose got to happen. It was like a back and forth type of thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. It leads to more discovery.
Mm-hmm.
So I know specifically there was one moment in our conversation where you had stated something, and I heard where you were coming from and what, and so if I'm like already like in my head, like, oh my God, what is she going to say? Oh, I need to figure out my like strategic response of like what's going to make me right. If I'm thinking about that instead of actually listening to what you're saying, um, you miss out on little cues of maybe there's misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there was a moment in our conversation where you had stated something, and I was like, whoa, uh, that's not where I'm coming from. That's not what I was trying to make happen. That wasn't my goal. And I got to respond and say, hey, this isn't where I was going. This is where I was going. This is what I was trying to accomplish. This was what my intentions were. Um, and you don't get that opportunity to clarify things if you're not listening. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, So that's the other benefit of being listening with intention, you know.
Hmm. And I think that also falls into our next tool, which would be being open. When Junior was telling me all of the things that he was feeling and what was going on for him and where his come from was, again, I sat there and I listened with intent, but I was open to all of the possibilities that were going on of, oh, I can see why you were feeling this way. I can see where you came to that, um, you know, to that conclusion. I could
Hmm.
see why you were feeling, I don't know what the word you were using, attacked and disconnected.
Hmm.
I'm trying to go back and remember all of the things, but I know that, like, being open to what is being said and really just taking it in without getting defensive and without, like, realizing that you weren't trying to make me wrong and you
Hmm.
weren't necessarily telling me that I'm, I don't know, a bad mom, or that I'm not giving you a chance to be a dad. Like, I don't know, not
Yeah.
something that you and I talked about, but I didn't create that meaning in my head, or I didn't create that in my head of, like, oh, you're saying these things and this is what you really mean. I just sat there and listened and was very open to all of these possibilities of what was going on, and took them into consideration of, okay, like, this is what came up for you, so this is how we can, I don't know, move forward, and this is how we can be better next time.
Hmm.
um and so I know that I think it was just like staying grounded, being able to just, like, sit there and listen to what each other has to say, and keeping calm, and realizing that you're not out to attack me and I'm not out to attack you,
Hmm.
would allow that openness to occur as well.
Yes. I think being being vulnerable to me also means being vulnerable with yourself,
Hmm.
right? Because you can be vulnerable and express everything that you're feeling, right? That is vulnerable to do with someone. Um, but you can also be vulnerable with yourself, like taking a look at yourself, right? Asking yourself, okay, is this a blind spot for me? Can I be better maybe in this place? Like, am I closed off to this? So being vulnerable and actually really asking yourself, like, am I responding in this way, or am I like acting in this way? Um, that takes vulnerability in itself also for
Hmm.
yourself, as opposed to just being like, nope, 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 I got me figured out. Nope, I know what I'm doing. Nope, this is what you're doing. Actually questioning, could I be better here? Um, that that can lead to, yeah, maybe I can be. Um,
Hmm.
and maybe, we can work on this together.
Hmm.
Um, so,
I think, like, when it just came up for me right now, but one a great example of this is whenever you give feedback to Eduardo and Eduardo gives feedback to you. Like,
mhm,
both all three of us have chosen to continue to be very open and honest with each other, and I
yeah,
feel as though that's why it benefits us so much, because when Eduardo has, like, hey, I noticed, like, this is what's going on, and gives you some feedback, and you don't turn it into, you think you're a better dad than me, you think you know more than me, like, you don't get into this defensiveness. You just, like, oh, that's a possibility, like, oh, I see where that's going on, and, like, it's the same vice versa, right? Like,
yeah,
oh yeah, I can see how I can come off that way, or how it looked that way, like that was the perception. And so I
hmm,
feel like that's a great an example of just being open.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the another one we talked about was your choice of words. Attacking words are so easy to go at, right? We when Junior and I had this conversation, we engaged in what I said earlier was fair fighting. And in fair fighting, there was no screaming, there's no yelling, there's no name calling, there's no cursing. Junior got to tell me what was going on with him. I got to tell him what was going on with me. We went back and forth. We gave each other the floor. And we also chose our words wisely to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that the conversation kept moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And we were eventually able to get to a resolution rather than take apart all of this
Destruction.
work. Yeah. All
So
of
I
this work that we've done over the years.
Yeah, and I put that in there. Use words for resolution, not destruction. Um, because words can do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's for example, self-talk. Like the words you use for yourself are going to either create amazing things for you, uh, you're going to give you amazing resolution, or they're going to cause destruction. Um, so people say like, right, sticks and stones can break my, or um,
Sticks and stones
sticks
can
and stones
break
can
my.
break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Words are powerful, in my opinion. I think words matter. So your intentionality on what words you use for people and with people matters. For me, in our conversation, it was really important to tell you that I am not your enemy
Mm-hmm.
and that I don't want to be your enemy. And it was really important for me to tell you that you're not my enemy either. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you to be my enemy. And I think that matters.
Mm-hmm.
What else matters is that even if we're in a bad place, we created values. And for me, they were really important. So for me, it was really important to say that, our 4 values that we made, it was really important for me to say that I am going to continue to live by these.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we disagree, or even if, we may be in a weird place right now, like I'm using these words that we have assigned mean something. And that's what I'm going to do my best to live in. Um, so what you say to the other person can be extremely powerful. And even, you know, if there's a point in time too where you feel an apology is necessary, that can be meaningful also, right? And sometimes apology isn't necessary. Um, but an apology can go a long way too. And some people expect apologies. Uh, and you know, um, sometimes they don't ever come, or they won't ever come. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you just have to accept that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I think that is something for me that I have really learned these past, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, is that choice of words matter a lot. Uh, just based off of my experience with people and observation and my own choice of words, they really, really, really do matter. Um, and they also matter when you don't follow through on them. And that's also
Mm-hmm.
something um, that I've gotten to experience. So um, they matter. Make them matter. Treat them like they matter. Um,
Right.
then you're much more intentional on what you say.
Mm-hmm. And I think to continue forward with that, or to add on to that, is body language. Your choice of words matter, and when you're not talking, your body language speaks for you, and also has a form of communication in itself. Um, when Junior and I were talking, we FaceTimed, and I know that correct me if I'm wrong, Junior, but I think both of us value being able to see each other when we talk, and being
Yeah.
able to look at each other in the eye and have those verbal cues. I know that I tend to have the experience of people misunderstand my come from um, often, and I something I get to work on, and I get to work on my tone. And I know that I'll use words, but because I'm such an assertive person at times, people think that I'm upset, and usually I'm like, no, I'm just trying to get this done. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, no, I'm very hyper focused at the moment, and we get to have this done. And when I can talk to somebody and they can see my nonverbals and see that I'm this compassionate woman, that I'm simply like, just I'm trying to just get this done. It's not anything to do with anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I engage with a eye contact, and we are not rolling eyes at each other, and we're not looking off to the side, or on our phones and like scrolling through social media, like, and nodding away and casually listening and not listening with intent. Um, those are the kind of things that can really contribute to having a positive outcome of the conversation that you're having.
Yeah, I think body language in itself, you can read a lot from body language, and sometimes body language uh, can be interpreted incorrectly with what somebody is feeling, like RBF, right? Like you see somebody with a resting bitch face, you're like, damn, like what's going on with them? And like,
I have the opposite effect. I smile at the most inappropriate times, and our son does it, and
yes,
I I
he
I
did.
can't. Yeah, I can't help it though. Like, I don't even know when I'm doing it, but
I don't know if it's like maybe like a nervous tick or like a
I think
fearful tick or
I
something,
think it's a coping, like,
or coping.
defensive. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I know when I'm uncomfortable, I like will smile, and I know Eduardo has told me that both Armani and I
Yes.
like drive him nuts, because he's like, "Do you think I'm stupid?" And I'm like, "What? Why do you think like why do you think that?" And he's like,
Yeah.
"You're laughing." And I'm like, oh, "I'm so sorry. I'm uncomfortable right now."
Yeah, right. And but that's
Yeah.
perfect, right? Like body language matters. People pick up things from body language, right? Even if
Hmm.
it's something that's incorrect,
Right.
right? If you're laughing at a time where somebody's being vulnerable, or you're like smirking, like somebody's going to think, "Oh man, like you're not taking me seriously. Like you're laughing at my pain or my vulnerability right now." Right? And then realistically, it may be something that you have a nervous, uncomfortable feeling. Maybe you feel like, oh man, like I have anxiety about this, like I turned up in this way and now they're feeling this way, like, yeah, it can. And so that's how your body language, right, comes out.
Hmm.
But if you then become aware, like, oh, my body language is saying this to people,
Hmm.
like, you can start acknowledging that. I'm like, okay, cool, let me try and fix my, like, let me do the body language that is appropriate to what I'm actually feeling.
Yeah.
um
I have
that
to work on it. I know that you experience this with me, so I work on it. I really do. I look down, I look away, like I will take deep breaths and like, don't smile, don't smile, because like, I can feel it coming on. But I'm like, I'm not laughing. I'm not happy. I'm so uncomfortable at this moment, and conflict is something I don't avoid, but I don't enjoy being in conflict with people. And so, like, when somebody approaches me, I'm like, I'm so uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to do this. I just want us to be okay again. Like, I want us to
yeah.
get back to the way it was. And so, people will, give me their feedback. And I'm like, okay, thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, no, this is
can we
something
move
that I
on?
know
Mm-hmm.
with you, and I know it's something with our son.
Mm-hmm.
um and it's just like one of those uncomfortable thing. He feels uneasy, and like,
Mm-hmm.
so it comes out in that way. And it's, for somebody who doesn't know, it
Yes.
can be perceived as something totally different than what he's actually feeling.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a trigger for some people. So.
yeah, and that's why body language is so important.
Hmm.
You know, the way your body language shows up, uh,
Hmm.
people are reading it.
I
So
mean, I put my finger over my mouth too, and it helps a lot. Like I'm like,
yeah, that's a great way to control.
yeah, like I'm tapping right here, and I'm tapping
Mm,
here, and I'm like, I'm seriously listening, and I am so uncomfortable, but it's helping me with my uncomfortableness, so that you know that I'm not trying to be disrespectful, and I'm not trying to brush off or laugh off what it is that's
yeah.
going on. But I also know my coping mechanisms are not the healthiest. So,
um, but yeah, that's the great part is that when you know something, um, that's when you can start working on it, as you say
mm,
you are.
mm.
Um,
And then the last thing that, well, another tool that we also talked about was respect, which is, how we're going to continue rolling on. My laughing can come off as disrespectful. And luckily, Junior has known me for,
a
I
long
don't know
time.
how, 20 years. How long have we
It's
known each other?
been
You
a hot
know
minute.
that I giggle, I laugh. Like laughing is my unhealthy coping skill. I laugh at uncomfortable events, and I laugh when I'm upset even. And I mean no disrespect, but we still talk to each other in a
Hmm.
respectful tone. We respect each other's ideas, we respect each other's opinions.
Hmm.
um and so, like, having that respect, I'm not out to make you wrong, and I'm not going to disrespect you by calling you names. Like, there are just so many different ways you can be disrespectful, and you want to have respect given onto you. So you like, I don't, that's something I always fall back on. Like, you give onto others as you want for yourself, man. Like, you don't want people to be disrespectful to you. So.
Also, I mean, there's also something to be said, right? Whenever, even if someone isn't so respectful, or even when somebody doesn't know how to communicate healthily, there's something to be said about the way you show up yourself.
Mm,
If you show up in a respectful manner, in a vulnerable place, in a coming from I place, showing up in all these ways, you get to walk away clean.
mm,
You get to walk away good with yourself, right? This other
mm.
person um, may not be living in that. They may not, I mean, they may walk away feeling good about themselves, but their life may say otherwise. Meanwhile, you may be walking away saying, you know what? That didn't turn out the way I wanted, but I feel really good with how I showed up and
Right.
how I uh, did my best in healthy communication. And you're able to continue on your day um, much easier than, you got kids, like showing up with your kids, like knowing that you showed up in the way you wanted will help you in the rest of your day or wherever else you need to show up, and it doesn't carry over, right? So
Right. Yeah.
there's something to be said with having respect and for yourself and how you even show up within yourself.
Yeah,
um,
I know for me that was something you taught me when we were younger. Like, there was I didn't respect myself. I wasn't, brought up in a positive environment, and there was a lot of demeaning things that happened to me as a child. And I know that when there was conflict that arose between me and somebody else, you were always like taking a high road, and it was so frustrating that I was like, can we just like have like duke it out with them, like, like not fight, but like, no, like we get to stand up for ourselves, and we get to like defend our honor, or like we get to say something back. And like, you were able to help me realize that, like, you're not always going to get somebody willing to listen, or you're not always going to get the outcome that you want, and you get to walk away with like your integrity. and respect yourselves by not engaging in that kind of behavior, you know? So I agree with you that really like puts you onto the path of being a better communicator.
Yeah, it keeps you. You keep your dignity. You keep the. If you want peace for yourself, you keep the peace for yourself. Um, and like, and even then, being said, there are times when you get to put boundaries in place. There are times where you do get to stand up for yourself. Um, but in the way you do that, even matters.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think that kind of sums up our module. Just know this is something that Nessa and I have opportunities in also. And it is
Mm-hmm.
something that has taken us a lot of work, a lot of effort, and a lot of vulnerability and openness to even like do this recording. We had this talk yesterday,
No, that was a couple of days ago.
a couple of days ago. I don't know what day it is, but we had this talk recently, and because we had this
Mm-hmm.
talk recently, we're able to like come out the other side, record this episode, speak on. We're not hypocrites. We get to do the work also. We are living it,
Mm-hmm.
and because we're living it, we know that other people can also, and we know how much it serves us and helps us. So we get to do the same work also.
Yeah, I want to like discredit any kind of story out there that we have it all figured out and that like we have arrived and we are this all knowing and better co-parents than anybody else. Like we're still figuring things out as opportunities come. Our boys are still young, so when they become teenagers, I'm sure that's going to create all kinds of opportunities for us to have more conversation. And continuing to grow with each other and keeping the commitments that we have is
Yeah.
what always gets us over and what always gets us to keep moving forward. I
Mm-hmm.
know that I talked about this when we were having this conversation the other day. Junior talked about how it, he's moving forward and he wants us to keep moving forward. And I highlighted like we are moving forward. We're just moving forward looks different for both of us. For
Yeah.
me, I see us moving forward. It's just not in the way that you perceive it or the way that you may want it to look, or something like that. But I know that we are both moving forward. We're just doing it in our own way, and I
Mm-hmm.
know that they're both healthy and they're both progressive.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that at the end of the day we have that same goal of our boys come first, and
Yeah.
we have the four values that we talked about that we continue to uphold with ourselves and as well as in our families. So,
Mm-hmm.
well,
Awesome.
I feel like that is a really well-rounded episode. What do you think?
I mean that was great. Maybe a little long winded in some places.
I
A
know
great dad joke to start. I will say that.
you talk so much. It's okay. We forgive you. Just kidding.
I have to pee so bad.
That is an
Um,
overshare, my friend. Overshare. I need to eat though. So, you ready to dance it out?
yeah, I'm gonna do the need to go pee dance. All right,
Mm-mm.
let's go. Oh,
No. Come.
I got to pee. I got to pee. I got to go pee. I got to pee.
So bad. Overshare.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.
Overshare. Overshare.